How to Date a Princess by Piemaster128. Chapter 2, The Gala Rewrite. Now, this is basically a one-chapter story, but it was rewritten, hence the rewrite in the title. Hope you guys enjoy. Flash Sentry straightened his tie one last time as he gazed at the mirror. He was wearing a sharp black tuxedo with a dark blue tie. His orange coat and blue mane had been washed and combed to perfection, as his teeth shone after a vigorous brushing. All in all, he thought he looked quite good. It was certainly better than wearing armour for the 1000th time. Plus, the suit was far more comfortable. Thank you, Rarity, he thought. He hadn't been sure what to expect after 12 appointments with her and her sewing box, but she had been right. The blacks looked good. Nodding at his reflection, he turned away from his mirror and trotted across his room to Princess Twilight's castle and out of the door. Only to immediately face Hoof, go back in, grab the purple rose with no thorns that lay atop his dresser, and leave again. Hopefully he wouldn't be that forgetful for the rest of the night. As he walked down the hallway, he tried to imagine what would happen tonight. He had never been to Celestia's gala, and based on the stories he had heard around town and the castle, he didn't think he would ever have wanted to. In fact, he still wasn't sure if he really wanted to go. It sounded just as boring as any other social event he was forced to attend during his guard duties, and extra stuffy, with all the nobles crowding up the ballroom. But Twilight needed him to avoid the criticism showing up alone would bring, especially after what had happened a month ago with Duke Bullhorn, and there was no way he was going to let her down. He couldn't help but growl slightly at the thought of that stuck-up jerk. If Twilight hadn't taken care of him, Flash would have loved to personally toss him out of the castle. The things he said were just so... Flash took a deep breath, held it for 5 counts, and let it go, hoping it would calm him down. It worked, a little. That was in the past, and tonight, Princess Celestia and tons of other guards would be there, which would hopefully dissuade the stallion from speaking about Twilight like that again. Hopefully. He was jostled out of his thoughts as he arrived at Twilight's room. Well, this is it. The big moment. Sorta. He knocked on the door, receiving a quick, "Just a second," from inside. When the door opened, any doubts Flash had were washed away as he tried to keep his mouth from hanging open and his wings from springing out in excitement. This night would be fine. And by Luna, he was one lucky stallion. Twilight was breathtaking. She wore an elegant purple dress that seemed to flow with every move she made. It was covered in star designs that made it look like the beauty of the cosmos had wrapped themselves around her. Her mane was done in a similar style to the one at her coronation, and it seemed to shine with its own set of stars. She was blushing, which somehow made her look even more beautiful. Well? She asked nervously, not making eye contact with Flash. How do I look? Flash blinked and said the only thing that came into his mind. I think you might make Princess Celestia jealous. Twilight blushed harder as her head shot up in surprise. Flash! What? You look spectacular, he said, gesturing to her with his hooves. I bet you're going to outshine everyone there, even Princess Celestia and Princess Luna. Twilight lowered her head and let out a sigh, muttering, You don't need to exaggerate so much. Oh, yes, he did. Well, he would. If there was anything to embellish. First, I'm not exaggerating. Second, as your date, it would normally be my job to compliment you and exaggerate. The only problem is that there is no way I can possibly think of exaggerating how good you look. He smiled gently as he lifted her chin so that her eyes met his own. They were beautiful, just like the rest of her. Trust me, you are perfect. Almost. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the rose that he had nearly forgotten and slid it gently behind her left ear. There. Now you're perfect. She looked at him with wide eyes and bright cheeks, her mouth trying to form words, but only succeeding in making her look like a fish out of water. It was priceless. Twilight quickly recovered, rolled her eyes, and lightly punched his shoulder as she finally got her blushing under control. Ha ha! Very funny, Mr. Romance. Anything else you need to do as my date? Engage in playful banter, maybe flirt with you, and make sure you have a good night so I can ask you out again. Flash said with a huge grin, trying not to laugh as he earned himself a deadpan stare from Twilight. However, he would make out the smile that was trying to work its way through. Technically, you only asked me out because I was refusing to ask you out, given that I didn't want to force you to make up for my mistake, remember? But I was still the one to ask you, Flash said as he took his place by her side and raised a wing to ask permission. Twilight gave a small nod and Flash dropped the wing across her back. It was much easier than holding hooves, especially as a Pegasus. Plus, it enabled him to hold Twilight all the closer to him, so bonus. Her dress was smooth under his feathers, and he could feel her wings twitch against him. Besides, if this night goes well, maybe we can have a real date. One without nobles and all this pomp and circumstance. Even though I don't really know if I'll like you as more than just a friend? Twilight asked, twitching nervously. That's what it's for, Flash said, undeterred. Think of them like research. You like research, right? That earned a silly smile from the purple Pegasus. Victory. Then I guess we'll just need to see if this project requires multiple tests to reach a conclusion, Twilight said as the two began to leave the castle to meet up with her friends. I suppose so. 1 month ago, Flash Sentry was, without any reasonable doubt, completely and utterly bored. Seriously, how long could one noble talk about a freaking house? He had been going for so long that Flash had enough time to count the panes in each window of the entire throne room twice, and it was still more entertaining. Could the sweet embrace of death free him from this eternal torture? Or at least slightly sweet embrace of piano falling on his head and knocking him out? Well, he couldn't complain all that much. He wasn't the only victim here. Princess Twilight was the one who was actually listening to this windbag, and he could tell she was not having fun. She was slumped on her throne, her wings were twitching, and her smile was ever so slightly strained. Spike was snoring on his own throne on the opposite side of where Flash stood. At least the little dragon was being spared this torture. Think, Flash, he thought. There has to be something, anything you can do to distract yourself. Well, there was nothing in the throne room. He would have even tried to memorize the crystal map. Or was it the crystal table? He never asked. If it was actually activated. But nope. Oh, good Celestia, when he was this bored, sometimes he wondered how he even ended up in this situation. When did this all start again? About 5 months ago. That was it. Shining Armor had selected him and a group of crystal ponies to transfer to Ponyville in order to serve as the Twilight Guard. Cool name, and as the name implied, they would be protecting Princess Twilight. While she had originally refused to have guards, despite the many, many cases she could have used them, the aftermath of the Starlight Glimmer village incident had led to Celestia, Luna and Cadence all overruling her on the issue. Despite the importance of their task, the group was small, far smaller than Flash would have expected. There were only about 30 strong, but Shining Armor had said that this was mainly to allow Princess Twilight to get used to them before he expanded it. Smart idea, though what had come as a major shock to Flash was that he was put in charge as the Princess Twilight's guard captain. Him! Was he really the most qualified pony for this job? Thankfully, it didn't actually turn out to be too difficult. His primary job was setting up the schedule and positions of the guard, and ensuring that every pony was keeping up with their training. However, given the fact that Twilight had received no guards until up to this point, Flash's primary concern was making sure her castle was secure, as this was the most likely place that she could be attacked, if it ever came to that. The only problem was that Twilight was still stubbornly refusing to allow any more guards than the ones Shining had already sent, which meant Flash didn't have enough guards to protect her and the massive castle she now called home. Maybe the other princesses could have overridden her again, but they hadn't. Maybe they didn't want to force too much on her at once. Flash didn't know. Unfortunately, because Twilight still didn't think she even needed guards in the first place, no amount of reasoning, talking or graphs could convince her to get more. Flash had tried for hours, but she had her own counter-arguments and her own graphs to combat his. Not even Spike could out-logic her on that front. As a compromise, Flash himself volunteered to be Princess Twilight's personal guard. This way he could be sure she was protected when out of the castle, and with communication from the Crystal Empire, Flash could call for backup should the need arise. That had yet to happen, thankfully, despite the crazy shenanigans that happened on Ponyville on a weekly basis, more often than on Tuesdays. Plus, chances were that Shining Armor would not be pleased if something happened to his sister, and Flash knew from other guard stories what would happen if Shining lost his temper. As an unforeseen bonus, this arrangement also meant he had more time to talk with Princess Twilight outside of his scheduled duties. She was actually quite pleasant to listen to, surprising for Flash. She had just as much interest in old legends and grand adventure tales as he did. The two had spent hours discussing them and sharing the ones they knew, and it really made Flash smile every time they sat down to talk. Sure, when she switched the conversation, some of her more technical talk went so far over its head it might as well be taking a trip to the moon, but it was still fun to listen and watch just how animated she was. Also surprising was that Princess Twilight had, on their first day, told them to just call her Twilight, saying that she didn't want the ponies who would be working so closely with her calling her Princess all the time. This had been the first time a princess had specifically asked not to be referred to by her title, so Flash was immediately intrigued. Very intrigued. So intrigued, in fact, it made him pay more attention to her habits and behaviours than he did for the other princesses. He had quickly concluded that she was actually pretty cute, and rather dorky. Brilliant observation there, Sherlock Holmes. Even more surprising, because apparently that was possible, Twilight was really taking the time to get to know all the guards on a personal level too. All of them. Celestia, Cadance and Luna always accepted requests for time off for family events, but Twilight remembered when the guards' families' birthdays were, and gave them pay bonuses and scheduled vacations without needing to be asked. She even gave Flash an extra few days so he could travel to Canterlot and deliver his father's birthday gift in person, an amazing gesture considering his father couldn't walk due to a flight accident. And she remembered that! It just served to make her even more awesome. "Thank you, Duke Long-Winded," Twilight said, breaking Flash from his daydreams. "I'll be sure to consider visiting your family's estate." Did that mean, could it be? "Excellent," the short stallion with a lime green coat and dark green mane said, bowing politely and tipping his top hat. "I certainly hope to see you soon." He continued, nodding and turning to leave. The moment he was gone, both Flash and Twilight sagged dramatically. "Sweet Celestia, it was over!" "Thank goodness," Twilight muttered. "If I had to hear one more thing about his collection of clocks—" She sighed, slumping even further. "Please tell me that's all," she begged, looking at Flash pleadingly. Flash just smiled. "Yes, Twilight. He was the last meeting you had for the day." BAM! Flash reacted on his well-trained guard instincts, leaping on the table and blocking the princess from view before he even realized who was standing in the door. Then his brain caught up with his body. He registered the pudgy brown unicorn with the red and orange mane. He had to redirect his mental faculties to try not to face hoof in exasperation. "Oh, come on! Princess Twilight!" Duke Bullhorn thundered as he stormed forward. "I demand an audience with you this instant!" Off to the side, Flash saw that Spike, on the floor oddly enough, Flash guessed that he fell off his throne when the Duke came in, was frowning at the throne room's doorway. A thick orange barrier was blocking the entrance. Two of Twilight's guards were hammering away at it, but Flash saw a flick of a purple wing in the corner of his eye, and they stood down. "Ugh, if this day could get any worse," Flash thought, but there was nothing for him to do but jump down and resume his position next to Twilight. As Bullhorn hadn't directly attacked Twilight or any guards, Flash couldn't justify throwing him out before he delivered his speech. He was just sure it wouldn't take too long before the Duke shoved his hoof in his mouth. Bullhorn was, in Flash's opinion, one of the worst nobles in Equestria. Someone like Prince Blueblood were annoying, but at least they left you alone if you left them alone. This Duke, on the other hoof, would constantly seek out and verbally attack any pony who didn't give him what he wanted. Either that or he would rant about his family crest, a lion head, which also happened to be his cutie mark. In the Duke's mind, he was the only one that mattered, and he would stop at nothing to make sure he got everything he felt he deserved. This led to him being no less than 3 confrontations with Princess Twilight. Make that 4. Many of the nobles assumed that Twilight had the same authority as Princess Celestia, whereas in reality she could still be overruled by Celestia or Luna, and maybe Cadance. You would need to ask about that one. Despite this, and the fact that her inability to overrule Celestia had been made very well known, many nobles still tried to at least once convince Twilight to undo something that had already been decided by the Solar Sisters. Not only could Twilight do nothing, but most of the time she agreed with Celestia and Luna's decisions. Seriously, who would approve of cultivating poison joke for use in pranking powders? That was insane! Then again, it was Bullhorn's idea, but he digressed. This had led to more than one awkward conversation, not to mention plenty of wailing nobles. But they were always wailing about something. Bunch of big babies. It was probably the only downside to his new job, especially when this windbag showed up. Duke Bullhorn, Twilight began, please lower your barrier. I don't know why you are here, but antagonizing my guards is not the way to push through whatever agenda it may be.
I would need if your guards understood how to treat a real noble, Bullhorn huffed.
But he did as she asked, for once. Real noble my flank, Flash thought, glaring at Bullhorn. If his pompous and self-absorbed attitude wasn't bad enough, he had a habit of talking down to Twilight, almost as if he believed he was above her. Well, she would be miles above him even without a crown, in Flash's opinion. However, before he or Twilight could reply to Bullhorn's remark, a loud belch echoed through the chamber. Turning his head, Flash caught the end of green fire escaping from Spike's mouth as it condensed into a scroll with a small pop. One moment, Duke, Twilight said, grabbing the scroll in her magic and unwrapping the red cord, holding it shut. 2 golden tickets immediately slid out onto the crystal table. Crystal map? He would really need to clarify that soon.
Ah, perfect timing, for once,
Bullhorn huffed, prompting Flash and Twilight to both raise an eyebrow. Flash recognized those tickets for the Grand Galloping Gala. But what did they have to do with why he was here? Flash optimistically hoped that it was because he had lost his ticket, but he highly doubted it. Not with the Duke's history of audiences with Twilight. Please let it be that he just lost his ticket. Why is it perfect timing? Twilight asked, her voice carefully neutral.
Because it is exactly what I am here to discuss,
Bullhorn said, raising his nose in the air.
I don't know or care what a commoner like yourself used to do at the gala, nor why you were even invited in the first place.
But since Celestia deemed it fit to elevate someone as mundane as yourself to the status of princess, you need an escort to the gala, one that can make up for your lack of noble blood. Why did the universe hate him? Why couldn't it use all that energy to torture this diluted moron? Because if he was about to say what Flash thought he was about to say...
And my son is the only noble capable of such a feat. As such, he is to be your escort for the gala.
Oh, buck him! Bullhorn's son, Moneybags, was just as bad as his father. The only difference was that he was far more likely to simply whine and throw a tantrum than to actually do anything of importance, which made him ever so slightly more bearable. Only slightly. Judging by the angry growl Spike was giving him, Flash knew he was thinking exactly the same thing. Seriously, that had to be the most ludicrous and blatantly offensive demand Bullhorn had made yet. The very idea that he would try to dictate who Twilight was to take to the gala was so nonsensical, even Pinky couldn't make up that kind of idea. And she was the least logical pony Flash had ever met. Period. It didn't make her any less fun to be around, but still. Duke Bullhorn, Twilight said, her tone cold and her expression tightly controlled. Who I take to the gala is my decision, and mine alone. And seeing as I hardly even know your son, I'm afraid that he will not be my escort to the gala.
Well said, Princess. Tell him how it is.
The Duke scoffed.
This is a matter you should leave to those who know best, Princess.
He dragged out the last word like it left a bad taste in his mouth.
Not one to be made by someone who barely comprehends her new position.
Flash knew that Duke Bullhorn was oblivious to a lot of things, but did he really think he knew what Twilight's new role entailed? He was just a loud, whining noble. It seemed like a bit odd and very egocentric for him to believe that he knew more about Twilight's new position than she did. More so than usual, at least. I do know what is best for myself, Duke, Twilight said, her mask breaking slightly to let a bit of her anger show through. And I think I know far more about being royalty than you do. So again, this decision is mine. But Bullhorn didn't appear to be moved. In fact, he just seemed frustrated now. This Duke needed to take a hint.
As if your mere months in power could compare to a lifetime of experience. This is the best option for all parties involved, and you should be grateful that I am willing to offer you my son, someone capable of distracting from your bland background.
Flash really hoped his face would freeze in that ridiculous expression. See how noble he was then. Duke Horn, for the last time, I will not, under any circumstances, be taking your son to the gala as my escort. Her tone was as cold as ice now, and she was glaring at the Duke hard enough to bear holes in his skull.
And I'm telling you that there is no other option, Bullhorn proclaimed, his nose still hoisted towards the heavens. My son is the only one who can possibly be worthy to fulfill such an important role, and you will take him.
I will not, Twilight commanded. You don't have the authority to decide who I take to the gala, Bullhorn. Just like you don't get to open a dangerous gem mine on protected land or start a lumber factory in the Everfree Forest. The Duke's face twisted in rage, but Twilight did not break her gaze or even blink. Flash, meanwhile, had to revamp his struggles not to face hoof. He had forgotten about those stupid ideas. Good Celestia, this stallion was an idiot.
You little Oh, hell no!
Don't you dare finish that sentence! Flash snapped through gritted teeth, stepping forward. There was no way in hell he would let this Duke use such language to describe Twilight, princess or not.
You may be a guest here, Duke, but that doesn't mean I can't kick your sorry flank out for insulting or harassing the princess. Keep out of this, you worthless airhead!
Bullhorn replied, only to find his mouth suddenly gone as Twilight lit her horn, her eyes glowing.
Oh, you done messed up now, dude.
Flash couldn't hide his smirk as he stepped back to let Twilight do her work. I do not tolerate racial slurs in my castle, Twilight thundered, the entire castle trembling. Now you will listen to me, and you will listen well. I will not be taking your son to the gala as my escort because I already have a date. And if you do not drop this issue, I will make sure you never receive another gala ticket as long as you live. Now get out of my castle! And with that, Bullhorn vanished in a flash of Twilight's teleportation spell, one that most likely left him upside down in the town's fountain, if Flash could read the little quirk of Twilight's mouth correctly.
Oh, how he wished he had a camera set up.
Twilight's eyes stopped glowing as she sank down into her throne before face-tabling on the crystal map. Or, at least, she would have face-tabled on the crystal map if Flash hadn't grabbed a pillow from underneath the table and slid it between her head and the tabletop. He had made sure to keep at least one pillow under the table when it became clear that Twilight would face-table after every audience with a noble. At least, this way, he could prevent her headaches from getting any worse. Thank you, she muttered into the pillow, releasing a long sigh.
Of course, Twilight,
he said with a nod, giving her a slight pat on the back. At least he's gone, Spike said. But I don't know you had a date, Twilight. I don't, Twilight groaned into the pillow. Which means when I show up to the gala alone, he's going to just harass me even more and claim that I'm a liar. I'll never hear the end of it now. All because me and my big mouth. She lifted her head and smashed it back into the pillow with a thwack. Frankly, Flash wanted to face-table himself after what had just happened, but he thought that Twilight had that covered.
Then why did you say that?
Because I lost my temper and I wanted him to drop this stupid idea of his. But by doing so, I've just made things worse for myself.
Can't you just ask someone in town to go with you? Flash asked. You seem pretty popular.
Every pony in town seemed to love her, in the form of citizens loving their princess at least. Any pony I would ask would just say yes because I'm a princess, even if they don't actually want to get to know me better. Who would say no to the honour of escorting the Princess of Friendship to the biggest event of the year? So how would I know if someone actually wanted to go with me because they liked me? Plus, if the pony thinks they have to say yes, I would just be putting them under all this stress for just being me. Stress that would likely be compounded because the Duke would probably confront me at least once at the gala. And what if they say no because they don't want to go with some pony who thinks they're crazy? Come on, Twilight. No pony thinks you're crazy, said Spike. Smarty Pants incident, parasprites, time-travelling, self-doomsday prevention. Oh, Flash really hadn't heard the story behind that one. They would need to remember that for later. Okay, so maybe you've had a few bad incidents, Spike said, wincing. But that doesn't mean some pony won't say yes. And if that fails, you could always take Flash. Huh? Dragons say, what now? Both Flash and Twilight's heads whipped around to stare at Spike in shock. I mean, he's always escorting you into town and stuff as part of his job, so you could easily just say you wanted to get to know the pony responsible for protecting you a little bit better. It would be enough to at least show the Duke that you weren't lying. Flash opened his mouth to contradict him, but then stopped to consider Spike's words for a moment. Twilight had said that she had a date, so as long as she showed up with some pony, she should be fine. The Duke would still be mad, but he was always mad. Heck, he was probably mad at the sun for waking him up in the morning.
Celestial, demand you turn off the sun. Oh, that would be a fun audience to witness.
And Spike was right. He had seen so often with Twilight that it would be perfectly believable for him to be her escort for the gala. But wait, this was the gala. Even if he was just an escort, it was almost certain that the nobles, or any pony else for that matter, would just see him as something more. They wouldn't just be seeing two friends having fun together. They would see a couple going on a date, whether they liked it or not. Actually, given the dress requirements and the fancy food and the music and the dancing, it would be just like a date. A really fancy one surrounded by annoying nobles, but still a date. Oh boy. Flash had only ever had one date before, and while it was not a bad date by any means, it was subpar to be sure. So much that when he joined the guard shortly after, he had never tried again. So he had no experience with this kind of thing, and the idea of trying to be a good date for some pony as amazing as Twilight, frankly, it was a bit terrifying. But it was also rather exciting idea as well. He actually liked spending time with Twilight. A lot now that he thought about it. She was smart, funny, talented, a bit dorky at times, but overall just really fun to be around. In fact, now that Spike had pointed it out, dating her would probably be rather enjoyable. Even magical. Yes, dating the element of magic could be magical. Your detective skills are unmatched, Flash. He could actually picture the date would be like at the gala. He'd have a nice, fancy suit, while Twilight would look stunning in whatever masterpiece of rarity he could dream up. He would go through the playful motions of teasing and flirting with her, holding the door for her, pulling her chair out, complimenting her to no end, all the things a gentle court would do. They would laugh and have fun, so much so that even the nobles couldn't ruin it, and when they danced she would— "Spike!" Twilight cried, pulling Flash from his thoughts. Oops, he'd just gotten distracted. What was she saying again? I can't just force him to go with me to the gala. That would be abusing my powers as a princess, and— Nervous or not, Flash decided to take the chance. Here goes nothing. Hey, Twilight, we go to the gala with me? Twilight tried to spin to face him, but only succeeded in falling out of her throne in shock. Flash winced. At least she fell into the gap between the table and the map in the throne, rather than smacking her head on the table. So glad the universe was here to help him out a little, rather than just curse him as per usual. Would you, he repeated, helping her to her hooves and pointing at her, like to go, he pointed to the door, to the gala? He touched the golden ticket on the table, with me. His hoof came to his chest. It was very hard not to laugh as Twilight sputtered and tried to come up with a coherent answer. Her face bright red. But I can't ask you to... I mean, you don't... Very, very hard. Biting his lips to keep from laughing, Flash gently covered her mouth with a hoof, making her purple eyes meet his blue ones. Dang, they were pretty. Focus! Twilight, as your friend, I can't let you be forced into going with some pony as horrible as Moneybags, or any other noble for that matter. Seeing you happy makes me happy. So I'm not asking you to go because you're forcing me to. I'm asking you to go with me because I want to make sure you enjoy your time at the gala. And because, worst comes to worst, everything goes right back to the way it was when the gala is over. Okay? Flash gave her a soft smile. Twilight blushed and looked away. Okay, now she was just being cute. Okay, she stuttered. I would be honoured to have you accompany me to the gala. Cool, Flash said, grinning. Now, I believe your friend Rarity makes suits, right? Twilight nodded. Then I will head over there later today, so I can get fitted. I never thought of bringing a suit with me. Obviously, he was a guard, not a butler. We can go now, actually, Twilight said, still refusing to meet Flash's eyes. I need to pick up a book I lent her anyway, and it's been a while since I've seen her. We can catch up while she's taking your measurements. Could I come? Spike said very excitedly. At least it wasn't outright drooling the way he normally was when he talked about the mirror of his dreams. Sure, Twilight said, giggling at the little dragon as he leapt up into his normal position on her back. Flash didn't mind the extra company. They could all use a walk after the wild bullhorn storm, or whatever that storm of idiocy was. The present. As Flash and Twilight stepped out onto the castle, they were saluted by the 2 guards stationed out front. Just a short ways away, Flash could see the rest of the element bearers and Spike waiting near the flying carriages that would be taking them to Canterlot. The sun was just beginning its descent, bathing the land in a warm orange glow and making the crystal castle sparkle in a brilliant display. Too bad we can't stay back and watch the view together, Flash thought. Maybe another night. Because right now, Rarity was waving at them so furiously she was in danger of cutting herself on her dress. Or at least, that's how it looked. She somehow had designed it to look like it had been cut completely from crystal. It was so twinkly that it could have blended in with Twilight's castle, and Flash had the distinct impression it was trying to blind him. Flash examined the other dresses as they approached, if only to keep from seeing spots in his eyes for the rest of the night. Rarity must have made them all, because, while they were cut in the same style as Twilight's, they were carefully designed to reflect the pony who wore it. That seemed to be a recurring theme in her designs. Applejack was draped in a gown all the colours of a fall forest, while Fluttershy's shimmered like the wings of a butterfly. Rainbow's dress was as light and flowing as the wind it was patterned after, and Pinkie, well, in true Pinkie fashion, she looked like a giant cupcake topper. They all looked amazing, but Flash thought Twilight looked the best. Though, since she was his date, he was probably biased. Spike was there too, dressed in a black tuxedo just like Flash, only he wore a top hat and carried a small cane. Flash thought he looked rather dapper, and the glances Rarity was giving him implied that she did too. He waved as the couple approached. There you 2 are! What took you so long? Pre-date banter, Flash replied, grinning as Twilight rolled her eyes. The others all giggled at his answer. Thank you, ladies, I'm here all the time. No, seriously, I'll live here. I must say, Twilight, Rarity began, you look simply stunning. I knew my modifications would help, but I didn't expect them to have this quite the effect. Indeed she does, Flash agreed before the blushing Twilight could reply. But what do you mean by modifications? Enhancements, darling. This is not only her first gala as a princess, but her first gala with a date as well. She smiled and winked at him. I had to make her look her best, so I added a bit more flair by redoing the cosmos patterns to be more fabulous. So what do you think, darling? Rarity's gaze was suddenly as sharp-looking as her dress, and Flash was vividly reminded of her threatening him during his suit-fitting sessions with her very long, very pointy needles if he even thought about mistreating Twilight. Granted, there was no way Flash would ever do that, but he was nonetheless very pleased when Twilight had caught her in the act and stopped her. At least, this time, he should be fine. He smiled.
Well, I always think she looks amazing. You've outdone yourself this time, Rarity,
he said, laughing a little as Twilight tried to hide behind his wing to block her red face. An excellent answer, Rarity said with a nod, and Flash relaxed slightly despite himself. I think you might have quite the catch here, Twilight. Twilight replied, still hiding. Flash hoped she wouldn't be this shy all night. As adorable as it was, he actually did want to get to know her more. Enough chit-chat, Rainbow said, flapping her wings impatiently. Let's just go already. I want to talk to the Wonderbolts before they get surrounded by nobles again, like they did last year. I couldn't even get a single word in. There's also the rush we gotta worry about, Applejack said, moving towards the second chariot in line. Every pony's gonna be getting there at once, so unless we want to get bogged down in the mad dash inside, I recommend we get moving. Fair point, Rarity conceded and nodding. Flash shrugged. He had no experience with the gala, so he decided to just go with the flow on this one. However, he was surprised when he and Twilight were ushered into the first chariot on their own, judging by the look of shock and confusion on Twilight's face. Judging from the look on Twilight's face, she was surprised too. When they looked questioningly at Rarity, she said, A princess should enter first, and who better to escort her off the chariot than her date? Flash thought that she was rather enjoying teasing poor Twilight just as much as he was. That, or she just really loved trying to play matchmaker. Once they were all secure, the chariots lifted off the ground and made straight for Canterlot. Overall, the ride was only about half an hour away. While still early fall, Twilight spent most of the time under Flash's wing to avoid the cold wind rushing around them. Not that he minded. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Ever since Spike had brought up the idea of him and Twilight dating, Flash had been paying more attention to Twilight and her, well, her everything, really. She was strong and determined, just like any guard, and she would work to accomplish her goals and overcome any problem. Yet she was also kind and understanding, always willing to lend an ear to others or assist them with their problems over her own. Despite her status, she would still participate in community events or perform community services like reading to the sick foals in Ponyville Hospital. Her joy and excitement was infectious, even if Flash didn't know why she was so excited. And yet, she was humble, never overstating or overblowing her actions. She was willing to show her flaws and fears, reaching out to others in times of need. ... Oh, dear Celestia. He was in love with her. Or at least, that's what he thought those butterflies in his stomach meant. The ones that flared up every time she sat so regal on her throne, or read books so fast her eyes were a blur over the page, or laughed with him over a plate of hayburgers, or stayed up until 3 a.m. reading with Spike draped over her back because he had given up trying to get her to sleep. But no, he couldn't let these feelings overwhelm him. Not tonight. It was already a stressful night for her, and there was no way he was going to add to it. He would just be there for her, making her laugh and distracting her from whatever stupidity Bullhorn would throw at her. But right now, he needed to distract himself from how good it felt having her snuggled under his wing, because that was not helping. He stared out over the countryside as they flew towards Canterlot, which, what do you know, was a pretty good distraction. He enjoyed the sight of the vast open lands shining in the waning sunset, and the look of serenity on Twilight's face as she told him she loved it too. Maybe he could take her on a flying date to Canterlot on another perfect evening like this, the sun reflecting off her mane and eyes. Bad brain, bad. Focus. Before long they were flying over the streets of Canterlot, which were decorated for the gala. Even if most ponies couldn't get into the palace, there were still plenty of smaller parties held by individual ponies as well. Flash had attended some of the less formal ones before joining the guard, and boy, they were chaotic. Not quite pinky chaotic, but surprisingly close. It was truly a city-wide event, possibly even an equestria ride event. Though Flash thought the smaller parties might actually be more fun than the gala. Actually, if the gala was open to every pony, wouldn't any pony new actually come? Or would they just stay with their friends at smaller parties? That wasn't important right now. The castle itself looked far more impressive than it normally did. There were banners stretched between all of the towers and wrapped around as much of the building as was possible without blocking any windows or balconies. There were balloons tied to much of the outer walls, and elegant flower displays lined the walkway leading up to the main doors. Lights also covered much of the outer castle, making the entire structure appear to sparkle in the last rays of the sunlight. Just like Twilight's mane. Focus! When they landed outside of the large golden doors at the main entrance, Flash hopped out first and offered a hoof to Twilight like a true gentle colt. His heart fluttered as she accepted his assistance, although she blushed again, likely because the early arriving nobles were watching the two of them. Nearby, some ponies were also whispering while others openly glared at Flash, but he didn't really care. However, he could tell that Twilight did care by how much she was fidgeting, so he didn't hesitate to wrap his wing around her again as a makeshift shield. The nobles sniffed, as though they thought he was being too forward, but oh well, too bad for them. Twilight certainly didn't mind as she relaxed into his grip once again. He could get used to holding her like this. The other element bearers soon arrived and immediately gathered around them, buffering the couple from the rest of the nobles. Rainbow Dash in particular was giving them some pretty nasty looks. Flash was torn between trying not to appear too pleased as the other ponies squirmed and prayed to the Solar Sisters that he never was on the receiving end of one of those glares. They couldn't go inside right away because Rarity would not stop fawning over the castle. But once Applejack and Rainbow gave her elbows to the forelegs, every pony and dragon moved towards the front doors of the gala. But then the universe decided it was time to spice things up again.
What is the meaning of this?
A very familiar and very annoying voice sounded. Flash couldn't help it this time. He face-hoofed and turned to the left, catching sight of Duke Bullhorn angrily stomping his way towards the group. Can we at least get inside first? He thought. Then at least the gods could throw him out. Okay, maybe they could banish him from the grounds for causing a ruckus, but it would be far more entertaining to see him get thrown out, especially if he ended up in another fountain. However, before Flash could move, the rest of the girls interposing themselves between the Duke and Twilight, and by extension him. He blinked for a moment, unsure of what to do. He settled for squeezing Twilight with his wing. If he needed to intervene with the others, he would.
Bullhorn, however, snorted at the barrier in front of him. Get out of my way! This is between me and that sorry excuse for a princess.
Flash bristled, rage making its way to the forefront of his mind as he made ready to storm closer and speak up in the defense of Twilight. He was not going to let him make her feel that way about herself, especially tonight. But to his immense surprise, Fluttershy beat him to it. How dare you? Fluttershy said, her usually quiet voice as hard as a rock. That's no way to talk about Princess Twilight. She's a kind, smart and wonderful pony who earned her title in every way. So don't you dare try and insult her like that, mister. The Duke actually took a few stabs back at that, and Flash smiled a little, thoroughly impressed.
Nice one, Fluttershy. Hopefully that... Be quiet, you peasant!
Bullhorn thundered, puffing up his broad chest in her face. Fluttershy yipped and backed away shaking. Never mind. However, Flash once again prepared to move forward and assist. This time Rainbow and Applejack took point.
Don't you yell at her!
Rainbow yelled, flying right up to the Duke and poking him in the chest. She's way better than some stuck-up jerk like you. And just because it's a fancy party doesn't mean I can't kick your flank. Can you do that anyway? Seriously, what's stopping you? Twilight can probably pardon you for Luna's sake. The Duke returned the Pegasus's glare as Applejack moved up next to Fluttershy and draped a comforting hoof around her back. What's so great about being a noble anyway? Applejack asked. Bullhorn wheeled his head around to face her, but when he opened his mouth, all that came out were unintelligible stammers. The orange mare smirked. If it means I gotta act like you do, I'd much rather just stay the way I am, thank you very much. Oh, don't let him fool you, dear, Rarity said, stepping forward. He's no more of a noble than Prince Blueblood. Sure, he may have a title, but his personality is that of a raging diamond dog compared to that of a true noble pony. Bullhorn's right eye was starting to twitch now. Luna, it was getting really hard not to laugh at him right now. At least diamond dogs have better breath, Spike added, prompting a chuckle from the most of the group. Okay, now Flash was really impressed, and he could guess Twilight was rather amused based on the amount of muffled snickering he could hear from his side. The girls and Spike had managed to turn a big shot like Duke Bullhorn into a stuttering mess who couldn't even respond. He never would have believed it if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, and it made him smile. Also, rule 1 for dating Twilight: don't piss off her friends. Luna help him if he ever did that. But wait, where was Pinky? She wasn't with the rest of the girls, so where did she? Oh boy, this was gonna be good. The Duke was so focused on the 4 mares in front of him, he never saw Pinky sneak up behind him and pull out something fun. She then tapped Bullhorn on the shoulder. "Pardon me, my good sir," she said, giggling at her own funny accent. The Duke spun around, most likely to start shouting, only to squeak as he came face to face with a large cannon pointed directly at him. Pinky was lying on top of it, her pose turning quite a few heads. "You want to insult my friends?" said Pinky, her voice sweet as sugar. "I think you will find your world being a little more pink if you do so." Her smile was slowly turning more maniacal. Okay, rule 2. Don't mess with the pink party pony. He would make sure to highlight, bold, and circle that one when he made his list. And yes, he was going to write a list. Twilight love lists. Focus! But you... Bullhorn stammered, looking around in a panic. "Guards, arrest that maniac for bringing a loaded cannon into the gala." Like that would work. This was Pinky. Surely she had a way out of this. As a nearby guard approached, Pinky pulled out a set of papers from her mane and handed it to the mayor in armour, all without taking her eyes off of the Duke. "I am a certified party pony. This is my license to carry and use my party cannon to defend myself and my friends from sadness and frowns, which this stallion was attempting to force onto my friends." The mayor looked over the papers, nodded, and handed them right back to Pinky. "Everything checks out. Enjoy the party, miss," the guard said before returning to her post. Of all the things Pinky could have done, Flash wasn't expecting it to be so tame and legal, but whatever. The look of sheer confusion and terror on the Duke's face was well worth it. You're not," Bullhorn stammered, pointing a hoof at the pink mare. Pinky leapt up to her hooves and dramatically pointed at the Duke. "No, I'm Condiments! I've been promoted!" she exclaimed, prompting Flash and Twilight to both burst out into laughter. Oh dear Celestia, she was reading way too many old comic books. It still didn't make it any less funny though. What's better, Bullhorn seemed to finally realise that this wasn't a fight he was going to win, as he backed away from the posing mare before running away in full retreat. Flash took it back. If the rest of the night was like this, then by Celestia, it was going to be a fun night. Finally getting his laughter back under control, he watched Pinky slip the party cannon back into her mane, because where else would she have put it? Shaking his head, he turned to look at Twilight, who was smiling comfortably. "Thanks for that, everyone," Flash said. "I think you just made this night all the better for us. Right, Twilight?" "Well, it's certainly better than having to wait half an hour for him to leave us alone," Twilight said jokingly. "But seriously, thank you, girls. I don't know what I would have done without you." "Think nothing of it, dear," Rarity said, smiling proudly. "We couldn't just let that buffoon ruin your night, now, could we?" The rest of them voiced their agreement before Twilight swept them all, and Flash, into a big hug with her wings. Flash would never admit it, but being squeezed up against his date like that actually made him blush. Not that he was complaining. After Twilight let go, thankfully without noticing his blush, everyone continued to their doors, laughing amongst themselves as putting the Duke in his place. Flash wasn't sure they had seen the last of him, but what could possibly do once they were in the gala? Bullhorn may be a moron, but even he wouldn't be willing to risk losing his status by messing up the gala. At least, Flash hoped he wouldn't. Glancing at Twilight again, Flash decided to put Duke Bullhorn out of his mind. Making sure she had fun was all that mattered, and no amount of crazy nobles was going to stop him from doing just that. After arriving at the doors and showing the guards their tickets, they all took turns walking into the main entrance hall with him and Twilight going first. Said entrance hall had a large set of marble stairs directly facing the doors, where Princess Celestia would normally stand and greet those who entered. Normally she was the first one at the gala and spent her evening at the top of said stairs, but her absence seemed to imply that she had yet to arrive. The ballroom was off to the right through another set of doors, but Flash was distracted from looking inside by the fact that Celestia wasn't in her normal place on the grand staircase. Was she actually running late? Flash never thought he'd see the day. However, before he could ponder it any further, he was distracted once again when he and Twilight were announced by a well-dressed pony by the front door. Princess Twilight Sparkle and her escort, Sir Flash Sentry, Captain of the Twilight Guard. Flash blinked as he realized he had actually gotten a title, rather than just being called Princess Twilight's +1. Though he had a pretty good idea who arranged it. Twilight? Flash asked with a smirk as they waited for Twilight's friends to be announced. Yes? Twilight replied in a cheeky manner. Did you write Celestia to get me a title for my entrance? Maybe, she said, giggling. I couldn't just let them ignore you, now could I? Plus, I thought with a title, you might get just some respect that you deserve, being the captain of my guard and all. True, so thank you, he said with a bow. Plus, maybe we'll dissuade a few of the nobles from bugging me, which means I'll have more time to spend with my angelic date. He smiled, making Twilight giggle. That just made him smile more as his heart fluttered. If you keep complimenting me, you'll eventually run out of things to say. She had a point there. Not if I start quoting plays, he said, grinning devilishly. You better not, Twilight warned, but her smile made it impossible for him to take her seriously. Methinks the lady doth protest too much, Flash drawled in a horrible impression of... Well, it was so bad he hadn't even known what accent he was trying to impersonate. It appeared as though Twilight couldn't figure it out either, based on the face she was making. She cuffed him on the back of the head with her wing, but she couldn't keep from smiling. So, success. Better try again, just to be sure. You're right, that was an impression of the nobles. My bad. Let me try again. He cleared his throat dramatically. Ahem! Doth mother know you weareth her drapes? Twilight lightly smacked him again. Yep, definitely a success. Having trouble with your stallion, darling? Rarity said, giggling at their antics as she approached. He had actually forgotten about them for a minute there, and hadn't noticed them gathering around him and Twilight. I'm the one having trouble, Flash joked, rubbing the back of his head. Well, not really, but he was still the one being hit, although her wing was really soft. Well then, behave, and maybe I'll give you a reward if you're good for the rest of the night, Twilight said, turning away with a grin. Oh, so she does have a playful side, rather than just a shy side. This momentous discovery made his wings twitch with excitement, as his heart beat even faster inside his chest. But he would not be outdone. Flirting? Check. Flash said, pulling out an invisible checklist and an invisible quill in an imitation of Twilight. The alicorn shot him a deadpan stare, but the other girls laughed. He couldn't help but wink at Twilight. So, what do we do now that we're actually here? I'm gonna go find the Wonderbolts, Rainbow said, taking to the air. I'll catch up with you guys later. And with that, she was gone. At least she was consistent with her love of all things Wonderbolt. I better make sure she doesn't break something this year, Applejack said, trotting after the rainbow-maned Pegasus into the main ballroom. I'll be around. And then off she went too. I'm going to try the garden again, Fluttershy said, glancing towards one of the side hallways. I just hope the animals will be more understanding this year. Ah, yes, Flash had heard about that little incident. Though the stampede of animals would certainly be interesting. Maybe a little fun if they ran over Duke Bullhorn in the process. I think I'll join you, Rarity said, I hear Princess Luna has planted some spectacular varieties of nighttime plants, and I simply must see them to get inspiration for my next spring line.
See the sights, get inspired. That should be the castle's new logo.
Flash thought as he watched Rarity's eyes start to sparkle with images of dresses.
That or, warning, gets overrun by magical entities once every 6 months. Magical panic rooms are here, here, and here.
The second one was probably more accurate. Flash wasn't sure what to make of that. I'll come too, Spike said. I still need to show you to Princess Celestia's golden apple tree. Nodding in agreement, the three of them made their way towards the garden. So all that was left was Pinkie. I'll go disappear until the plot demands me, Pinkie said, bouncing off into the ballroom.
Flash muttered, staring after her.
Don't think about it too much, Twilight said, shaking her head. It's Pinkie.
Still not enough of a justification in my book, but to prevent myself from getting a migraine, I'll take your advice,
Flash said. To be fair, Pinkie had already pulled a party cannon out of her mane and produced legal documents saying that she was allowed to carry it. His limit of Pinkie shenanigans was probably reached for the night. The two of them followed Pinkie, Applejack and Rainbow Dash into the ballroom. It was still somewhat early in the evening, but the chamber was already full of ponies in fancy evening wear, mingling and admiring the decorations, which were quite spectacular. Banners hung from the walls, streamers wound around the marble columns, and there were dozens of flower pots filled with plants of every colour. Flash was pretty sure that the silvery blue blooms releasing gentle puffs of white mist were Princess Luna's speciality. As they began walking around, he could see that the centre of the ballroom had been cleared for dancing, and a stage for the band had been set up right next to it, but there was a number of small tables off to one side.
And along the far wall was a buffet!
Flash's mouth watered.
Free food was the best food.
And it didn't seem to be that weird, fancy food he found in Canterville's restaurants. He pointed it out to Twilight, who had a similar reaction, and the two ponies unanimously decided to head straight there. As he began to move towards the buffet, Flash was surprised to see that Princess Celestia was not in fact there yet. However, he could just make out Princess Luna near the stage talking to... Was that Fancy Pants? He wasn't quite sure from the distance and while moving, but Princess Luna's dress hit his eye almost like a punch. She wore a gown that looked like it had been taken from the view of a telescope, and Flash swore that he saw some of the constellations actually moving. He glanced at Twilight's dress and grinned.
She still looked better. Bias. Yay. Also, focus, less staring at your date, more making sure you don't walk into a random table like an idiot. The nobles have the stupidity covered for the night.
However, his train of thought was interrupted as he saw someone he never would have believed would attend such an event. Or at least not attended it without the pure purpose of messing everything up.
Is that Discord?
Flash asked, stopping and pointing so Twilight could look. Sure enough, the Draconicus was standing nearby, dressed very similarly to Spike and having a surprisingly normal conversation with a light tan Pegasus with a two-tone brown mane. Despite the fact that Flash had never seen the Pegasus, she seemed to be on friendly terms with the Master of Chaos as she waved goodbye. Judging by the look on Twilight's face, she probably had never seen her either.
It is,
Twilight groaned. Maybe he won't notice us.
I won't notice you, a loud voice drawled in their ears.
Jeez. Discord was now right behind them. Even with his years of guard training, Flash couldn't help but jump. He hated when creatures did that. It was bad enough when Twilight just decided to randomly teleport into a room, but at least her smell made a pop when it went off. Oh, please, Discord, not tonight. Anything but tonight, Twilight half groaned, half begged.
Oh, you needn't worry about me,
Discord said in a surprisingly serious voice.
I was informed by Celestia about your little date, and surprised to say, I would rather not have Rarity tear me into pieces for interfering with your evening. Or Fluttershy. He shivered. Cotton candy have mercy on me if those two came for me.
Wow, Discord is actually afraid of Fluttershy and Rarity's tempers? Flash could hardly believe it. I'll have to keep that in mind for the next time he annoys me. But which one is scarier? Both could be terrifying if made angry, but... Wait.
So you're not going to try to make this night chaotic for us?
Flash asked in suspicion. Not that I'm complaining, but you are the Lord of Chaos, right? Right, Discord said, smirking. But every time I've seen little Princess Sparkle here, I've been chaotic and crazy. So, you see, that means it's predictable now for me to be chaotic. So what better way for me to change it up than to be, well, normal? That seems almost too logical. Discord shrugged. Maybe, but what do I know about logic? Now, the reason I'm really here is because I'm looking for Fluttershy. Or Pinkie Pie. Either one will do, really. So long as I have some pony to talk to. Have you seen them? Fluttershy's in the garden, Twilight began, and Pinkie said that she had to go until the plot demanded her. Flash finished, causing Discord's ears to perk up. Oh, she did, didn't she? He said, pausing briefly to look above and behind their heads and wink. Flash thought he might have been winking at Celestia and Luna, given his height, but upon turning around, he found nothing but a wall. Who are you winking at? Flash asked, looking back at Discord in confusion. The reader. The what? Oh, never you mind. Well, then I best go find our little pink ball of sugar and sweets. Toodles! He snapped his fingers and vanished in a puff of smoke. The smoke then pulled out a top hat and proceeded to fly out of the door they just entered, much to the bafflement of the nobles trying to enter the ballroom. Okay, Flash was officially over his limit for crazy, unexplainable nonsense now. He looked back at the wall again, just to make sure it wasn't broken from illogic or anything, but eventually just shrugged. It was Discord. Better off trying not to figure him out. Well, that could have been worse, Flash said as Twilight breathed a sigh of relief. Let's just go find some food and hope he doesn't come back, Twilight said, making a beeline for the buffet. Flash followed closely behind. No mingling before eating? Flash asked. Twilight shook her head. Only ponies I see that I want to talk to right now are Luna and Fancy Pants, and they're still busy. Well, them and you, but you get the point. No ponies? That was a surprise. Surely there must be someone else here that she wanted to talk to, or at least plenty of ponies who would want to talk to someone as amazing as her. Okay, seriously, focus. They're not here yet. Ah, there we go. It's still early, and I had to skip lunch to get ready today, so I am starving. You skip lunch? Flash asked, surprised. I mean, you look wonderful. Understatement of the millennium right there. But it took you that long? Yes, it was the maid, mostly. I usually ask Rarity to do it. In all my studies, I never really learned a spell to how to make myself more presentable. It was just never really high on my priorities. As she spoke, she grabbed a plate and began loading it with food. The buffet was massive and it all looked delicious, and Twilight apparently thought so too, as she grabbed 10 hamburgers before moving on. Considering how often they went out for some, that was not surprising. They must have gone there at least 3 times a week for the past 6 months, and the no daydreaming, focus. No need to bother learning a spell to make yourself more beautiful if you look amazing normally, Flash said, smiling as Twilight blushed and looked away. Ah, there was the blushing he was familiar with. I'm not that special, she mumbled, as they reached for the desserts. I mean, there are some days I wake up with a scroll stuck to my face just because I fell asleep studying. It's just like how ponies think I'm perfect just because I became a princess, when I'm really not. I still make mistakes. I still need help sometimes. And I'm certainly not as special as some pony like Cersnia. I'm just a regular pony. A regular pony, huh? Allow me to present you with the counter-argument. Yeah, you've only fought an Ursa Major, Nightmare Moon, Tirek, the Changelings, Discord, King Sombra. You also happen to be the most skilled magic user in multiple generations that was able to solve an unsolvable spell and become a princess, Flash said jokingly, before gently rushing up against her and speaking in a much more caring tone. You don't give yourself enough credit. In your own accomplishments, or your looks. Twilight was now the colour of a tomato, but Flash could see a faint smile working its way onto her lips. Progress. With food in hoof, the two set off for the nearest table to enjoy their meals, though as they sat down, Flash noticed with concern that Twilight had far more food than he did. He thought the hay burgers would make up most of her meal, but instead she had apparently just kept grabbing more and more food while he was distracted with listing her accomplishments. She now had almost 3 times as much as he did.
Twilight, are you okay? I know you skipped lunch, but I've never seen you eat this much before, even when we had to skip lunch on the one day to reorganize the library.
Oh boy, what a long day that had been. It took forever to get his eyebrows to grow back. I'm fine, Twilight said, eating a hay burger in just 2 bites. My magic now needs to keep up with unicorn, Pegasus, and Earth Pony abilities all at once. Combine that with the fact that I'm still growing and I need to eat about double what a normal pony does. At least for now.
For now?
Would she need to eat more later? Did she have some kind of alicorn puberty to go through? On second thought, he didn't want to know. Twilight nodded. She ate another burger, wiped the ketchup off her mouth with her fries, and ate those too. Celestia and Luna need to eat about 1.5 times as much as a normal pony. So once I get as big as them, I should be able to reduce my calorie intake without feeling like I'm always starving.
Even if that's the case, how come I haven't seen you eat this much previously?
Well, I usually snack throughout the day, so my main meals are a decent size.
But I've never seen you snack. Do you just eat when I'm not looking?
Wait, that didn't make sense. How would you have timed that? I just teleport the food into my mouth. Or my stomach if I'm in the middle of meetings or something.
Is that safe?
It should be.
Well, that's not a good answer. Twilight,
Flash said, frowning at her. It might be time for a lecture, another thing Twilight loved. No, very bad brain. Go sit in the corner until after the lecture. Really, it's okay. I don't do it often, and it's only a mild discomfort if I...
Twilight,
Flash said firmly, causing her to stop and look at him.
I won't mind, and I highly doubt any pony else will. If you need to eat more at dinner or lunch or during meetings because you have a fast metabolism. Doing something dangerous, like teleporting food directly into your stomach, is unnecessary. The only ponies that may possibly care are the nobles. And if they complain, you can just say, I'm a princess, I can eat what I want.
Then they can't do anything about it. Insert Z snaps it. He smiled gently.
Please don't do that anymore, okay? Or I might just need to tell Celestia.
Twilight nodded. I won't. Sorry to make you worry. Well, lecture over, back to harmless teasing in hopes of seeing her laugh. Or blush. Or both.
No problem, Flash said, now grinning, though I was serious about the Celestia threat.
Twilight pouted. I'm not a little filly, Flash. I can take care of myself.
Pretty sure we're all fools compared to Celestia. I mean, she is over 1,000 years old, and just because you're an adult doesn't mean you're perfect or know everything. For example, did you know Celestia once got food poisoning herself?
Wait, really? Twilight asked, her eyes widening and her mouth falling open.
Oh, this was going to be fun. Really? Apparently a diplomat sent her a really expensive pineapple cake in the mail, but it got lost for a good month. But when it finally arrived, she refused to throw it out and instead ate the entire thing in one sitting. She was sick for a week. In fact, that was actually the week that you girls had to go and talk to that dragon that was covering Equestria with smoke.
Flash chuckled as he remembered his second week on the job. Trying to keep a puking Celestia in bed while telling her not to worry about the smoke visible from her window was not something he ever thought he'd be doing in a million years. Too bad she didn't put that in her letter to Twilight. Dear Twilight, I ate a rotten cake and now have food poisoning. Please go get rid of this dragon covering our land with smoke while I am busy throwing up. Signed, Princess Cake Lestia. You mean to tell me that my friends and I were sent to go talk to a dragon, not because of our skills, but because Princess Celestia had food poisoning and couldn't do it herself?
Twilight asked, trying not to let her jaw hit the floor. Her expression was priceless. Crazy, right?
Oh, I am so going to have words with her about this.
Twilight grumbled as she moved to the desserts on her plate. Princess Celestia or not, that is just ridiculous. Her greatest weakness. Cake! Flash said dramatically.
Twilight struggled to swallow her mouthful of ice cream before she burst out laughing. Her laugh was infectious, just like always, and soon he couldn't help but join in. They were attracting a few sidelong glances and grumbles from the nearby nobles, but Flash didn't really care, and Twilight was too distracted to notice. By now, Flash saw that the ballroom was beginning to fill up, and a lot more nobles had joined the party. The dull muttering in the room had also risen to a moderate level of constant background noise. Not too bad just yet, though, so it was nice. When they finished eating, the two ponies got up and deposited their plates in a nearby container. It seemed that Princess Luna had finished talking to Fancy Pants, so Twilight immediately began leading them over. But then the universe appeared in an evil villain costume and produced a random antagonist. Flash was going to punch the universe one of these days. He didn't know how, but hey, maybe Discord could help him.
Princess Twilight!
A deep and irritating voice called out,
I demand to speak with you this instant!
Turning, Flash just managed to swallow his groan as they came face to face with Moneybags, Bullhorn's son. He was a unicorn with a golden coat and a slightly darker golden mane. His QT mark was a bag of bits, or at least that's what Flash remembered it being from all of his audiences in court. And he was clearly annoyed, not that this was anything new. Or at least Flash thought he looked annoyed. It was hard to tell since most nobles looked like they were annoyed about 82% of the time.
There is no need to shout, Twilight said calmly. Any pony is allowed to speak with me if they simply ask. Now, what can I help you with?
You can help me by explaining why this Pegasus is escorting you to the gala.
Moneybags spat. Oh, great. They were starting where they left off with Bullhorn outside.
Someone please throw him out, Flash thought. They were inside now. It would be easy. Just find a unicorn, a window, and poof, problem solved.
The two of us have gotten to know each other so well that when he asked me to the gala as a date, I accepted. Simple.
Simple? You choose an uncultured commoner over a worthy noble suitor? He should not even be allowed to look at you, let alone escort you to the most important social event of the year.
Flash growled. He had much more culture than this uppity nincompoop. At least he knew how to not make a scene. No laughing at the table did not count as making a scene. By now Moneybags' shouting was attracting attention, and Flash frowned at some of the nobles' smirks. Clearly they liked seeing some pony try and chew out the newest princess that had been unyielding to their demands.
Celestia damned idiots! Go find something better to do than to watch me and my date. Seriously, this isn't a freaking hoofball game.
That is my decision, not yours or any pony else's, Twilight said, now glaring at Moneybags. And I certainly won't be taking a stallion who throws a fit just because I choose some pony better than him.
Flash would take that as a compliment and a testament to his skills in dating, even if said skills were practically non-existent.
Moneybags stuttered for a few seconds as his face contorted in rage even more.
Oh dear. Flash was not liking this. While Twilight still appeared calm, she had pressed up to him during the conversation, and he could feel her shaking. Out of anger or stress, Flash didn't know, but he hated the idea of just standing by while she suffered. It made him feel both helpless and enraged. He saw that Luna was frowning and making her way towards them. And while ponies were bowing and moving out of her way, Flash didn't think she would make it over to them before things got even more out of hoof. He did know that he needed to do something to end this nonsense. Nonsense. That just might work. Moneybags puffed up his chest. How dare you claim that this umbalo, Flash interrupted. Both Moneybags and Twilight blinked in confusion as they turned to Flash, who smirked. Even the nobles watching didn't know what to do or make of this, and Princess Luna just stopped dead in her tracks and was looking at him questioningly. Perfect. Flash winked at Twilight, silently signaling to her that the fun was about to begin.
Moneybags composed himself and growled, "Be silent, you! Umbalumbalumbalo! What do you? Bumbaba! Be quiet and let me umbalumbalumbalumbalo! What do you? Bumbaba! Shut! Bumbaba! Up! Bumbaloo!" Moneybags paused after that, staring at Flash with his eyebrows raised, as though waiting to see if he would keep going. Flash smiled dumbly and pressed his lips together. That seemed to be good enough for the unicorn. "Now! Boop!" Flash said in a rushed voice, ending with a quick boop to the end of Moneybags' nose. Oh, Luna, his expression was even better than Twilight's. And that was saying something. This was far too much fun. Moneybags' left eye was twitching. Many of the surrounding nobles looked shocked that Flash had outwitted, or maybe out-annoyed him, by just sprouting nonsense. Twilight was biting her lip, struggling desperately not to laugh. Even Princess Luna was covering her mouth to try and stifle her own giggle. Surprised to say, Flash thought he had won this round. Thankfully, before Moneybags could gather up his wits to try and speak again, a new, motherly voice called out, "There you are, Twilight." Oh, thanks, Celestia. Seriously, she was right behind them now. All three ponies turned to see Princess Celestia making her way towards the group. All the guests bowed as she passed, and Flash bowed as she drew closer, partly out of duty, partly out of reverence. She was still a princess after all. She was dressed in a gown that made her look like a phoenix, reds, oranges and yellows all wrapped around her in a stunning display that sparkled like her mane. "There is no need for you to bow, Flash Sentry," Celestia said as she arrived, giving Twilight a quick embrace and smiling down at him. "Princess Twilight decided that you would accompany her, so please rise and speak with me." Well, that was pretty surreal. Maybe she was more like Twilight than he thought. "Of course, Princess," Flash said, rising. "It's a pleasure to meet with you, at least in a less formal setting than normal." "This is less formal," Celestia said in a curious tone. "I thought this was supposed to be very formal. It is the gala, after all." "Fair point." But at least he wasn't standing there trying to impersonate a statue, like he usually was when he was around one of the most powerful ponies in Equestria. "Princess," Moneybags began, bowing as well. "Clearly you must see the problem here." "Better question. Why are you still here? Seriously, you can't be that stupid." "I see no problem whatsoever," Celestia said. "Twilight has brought a date to the gala, and I must say I am so proud of you for doing so." She smiled at the young Alicorn. "You have finally reached the next part of your lessons, and began looking for love. I am sure Cadence will be bouncing off the walls." Oh boy. Flash hadn't considered how her siblings would react to the date. Please let Shining Armor be gentle.
"It's only our first date," Twilight said, embarrassed. "Even if we do go out again, you might still be jumping ahead a little bit."
Hopefully she was right, though. Focus. Plan future dates later.
"Maybe, but a man can dream, can't she?"
Celestia asked teasingly. Apparently Celestia liked to make Twilight blush as well. Moneybags' eye was twitching again. "Go home, dude. You're not." "But he is just a commoner. He is not even a minor noble blood." "Yep, he is that stupid," Flash faced Hoof. "Good job proving the commoner wrong, bud. Give yourself a cookie."
"And what difference would that make?" Celestia asked, her voice growing a bit hard as she turned to face Moneybags, placing Flash and Twilight beneath the folds of her wings. "Princess Twilight has judged him to be worthy of her time, and he certainly appears to be more of a gentle colt than you."
"Exactly. Thank you, Celestia."
Flash was happy to hear the princess defending him, but he still wanted to mess with Moneybags. Since he was out of Celestia's sight, he leaned into the unicorn's view, stuck his tongue out, and pointed his eyes in different directions.
Twilight nearly lost her composure again over his ridiculousness, and Moneybags looked like he couldn't decide what was worse: Flash's taunting, or the fact that he was being taunted right under the nose of Princess Celestia without her noticing. and here Flash thought his face couldn't be any more priceless. He also appears to be better mannered than you, as you come here to harass Princess Twilight like a fool being told he can't have a toy, rather than a mature adult. Flash puffed out his cheeks and spun his eyes in opposite directions. Twilight snorted, her legs getting shaky from concealed mirth. Maybe Princess Celestia was wrong on that last point. A little bit, but she was right overall. At least he wasn't throwing a temper tantrum. And, furthermore, nobility has no standing on who she is allowed to be with, and trying to shame or harass her into being with someone of equal standing is highly unacceptable. In fact, seeing as you are one of the nobles who still refuses to cast aside your class prejudice, despite me and my sister constantly saying it is despicable, I don't think I will be inviting you back to the gala next year, as you clearly can't be trusted to act with dignity.
Oh my! Moneybags gasped in shock, while Flash pretended to dramatically faint, causing Twilight to begin to tear up. Seriously, whoever convinced him that the gala was boring? This was awesome! But...
No buts. This is my party, so I may invite and disinvite whomever I choose. Now then, Celestia said, turning back to Flash and Twilight, just as Flash straightened himself up. She didn't react to the fact that Twilight's face was now red from suppressed laughter, but Flash thought he saw her eyes twinkle. If you will follow me, Twilight, I would love to speak with you and your date in private. Twilight managed to nod, following after the princess as she turned to leave. Flash assisted her, but, unable to help himself, turned back one last time and waved to Moneybags, mouthing the words, "Bye-bye." Somehow, Moneybags' face got even redder as he tried to melt Flash with his glare. He was cut off when the three ponies walked away, entering a small side room reserved for the princesses. With a flash of her horn, Celestia coated the room in a soft golden glow. Before Flash could ask what she was doing, Celestia spoke. "Go ahead, Twilight." Twilight cried, falling to the side as her legs gave out. She was only spared from hitting the floor by Celestia teleporting a large pillow for her to collapse onto. That's you! Yay, he made her laugh. This night just keeps getting better. Silencing spell, Celestia said, gesturing to the shimmering walls. Rather handy in my opinion, especially when dealing with nobles. Was taunting Moneybags while I wasn't looking really necessary? Celestia raised her eyebrow at Flash, making him grin sheepishly. Guess he wasn't as sneaky as he thought. That, or she really did have eyes in the back of her head, just like his own mother. Sorry, Princess. After everything he and his father put Twilight through, I just couldn't resist. That and hearing Twilight laugh so much made it so worth any scolding he would get. Flash was surprised when Celestia giggled. "It is all right, Flash. I think your frustrations are justified, and judging by Twilight's reaction, I don't think she minded. Also, call me Celestia. I'd like to think we were more on even standing, since you are dating Twilight." "Oh dear, Luna, she was like his mum." "It'll be up to her if we date more than just this once," he said quickly, feeling his face heat up. "It's just warm in here. Yeah, that's it." "Yeah, right. Though, I will admit, I wouldn't mind having less formal dates in the future. Especially if it meant less nobles. Sure, they were entertaining to tease, but he would much rather have a date without them constantly bugging him and Twilight." "We'll just have to wait and see, then. But my point still stands." "Very well then, Celestia," Flash said with a grin, as Twilight finally began to calm down enough to breathe normally. "You doing okay, Twilight?" I could kiss you right now. If I could stand up," she said, still giggling. Flash thought he felt a little lightheaded for the first few seconds after she said that. But he recovered very quickly, as he realized the chance he had just been given. Well, since she offered, Flash leaned down and gave her a slight peck on the cheek as he helped her back to her hooves.
We'll just have to take a rain check on that then, he said as Twilight stopped laughing and blushed like mad as she looked away from him. An appropriate reaction. Wasn't that a bit forward, Sir Flash Sentry? Came Luna's voice.
She was standing in the doorway to the chamber.
Uh-oh, quick, what's a good excuse?
Oh, I got it.
Not at all. Nobles do that all the time. And I hear kissing some pony's cheek is part of the greeting in prance. Kissing her on the lips, now that is forward. But I am a gentle colt, and I think I struck the right balance between forward and what is expected for this date. Please buy it, please buy it, please. You make a fair point. And thus, dare I say, I approve of you and Twilight being together.
Luna said.
Just be sure you don't do anything you regret. Or else...
Luna, Celestia playfully chastised, don't threaten the poor stallion. I'm sure he's gotten enough of that from Twilight's friends.
Rule number 3. Don't upset the princesses, especially Twilight. Probably a no-duh moron rule, but still best to write it down.
I really have,
Flash said.
Especially Rarity.
She wasn't that bad, Twilight said, regaining a bit of her composure, though still not looking at Flash.
She threatened to tie me up and throw me to the diamond dogs till I learned my lesson.
Come to think of it, why was that her first punishment she thought of anyway? Luna laughed. Be thankful she said diamond dogs and not dragons.
I think she expected Spike to handle the dragon part.
Flash deadpanned, prompting the Solar Sisters to giggle and Twilight to nudge him with her elbow.
What? He's like a little brother to you, and aren't brothers supposed to protect their sisters?
Wasn't that literally what Shining Armor's cutie mark was? Protection?
In that case, you may want to worry more about Shining Armor,
Luna said with a teasing grin.
Or have you not told him yet?
Okay. So Celestia has eyes in the back of her head, and Luna could read his mind. Flash was really going to have to call his mother after this. I didn't tell them yet, Twilight admitted, looking sheepish. I didn't want him and Cadence to coming either to threaten him or try to assist me with the date.
Downside of being related to the Princess of Love?
Flash asked, chuckling. Yes, definite downside.
Look at it this way. If this works out, you don't have to worry about her setting you up on blind dates.
She wouldn't.
Princess of Love.
Twilight bit her lip. Okay, good point. But that's still an if.
Not convinced?
Flash asked, pouting exaggeratedly.
His poor pride.
Actually, no. Forget his pride. That did hurt a little bit, considering how he was feeling about her. But he had time. The gala had just begun, so he could still prove himself to her before the night was out. I like to have all the data collected before coming to any conclusions.
Just like any good scientist should.
As much as I love to hear you two banter, Celestia joked, a sly smile crossing her face, we really must be getting back to the party. Although, if you're looking for data, Twilight, might I suggest seeing how good of a dancer Flash is? Twilight's ears perked up and she gave a nervous laugh, one that Flash couldn't quite understand. Oh, no. I think we can skip that part of the data. I mean, there's plenty of other points we can explore and...
Oh, she's afraid of dancing in front of the nobles.
Well, he could fix that.
Hey, Twilight, will you share the next dance with me?
He asked. Twilight spun to face him, which was a mistake as they put their muzzles only a few inches apart. But...
Come on, Twilight. How bad could it be?
Flash asked, somehow managing not to stutter like Twilight.
Dang, she was pretty. Focus.
But I can't dance!
Really? Her dancing is interesting, to say the least,
Luna said, smirking slightly. I don't think you're helping, sister, Celestia said, elbowing her sister playfully.
And you are, Miss Teasing Motherly Figure?
Flash shook his head.
Well, good thing I can't dance either,
Flash said, taking Twilight's hoof and leading her towards the door. Huh? But then why?
Are we going to dance?
Flash asked.
Because you're a princess, so nobody can complain if you can't dance. Plus, even if we mess up, the only thing the audience will see is dancing. Plus, if your dancing is really that bad, then you can just say you're starting a new trend.
Huh. That was a good one. You would have to save that joke for when she wasn't so dense. But, Twilight, Flash said gently, turning to face her as they reached the door. Trust me. Please?
Flash gave her a reassuring smile before pushing open the door to the ballroom. There were significantly more ponies out there, and the band was well into a groove by now. Twilight hesitated when she saw the crowd, but a gentle brush of Flash's wing prompted her to continue. He was right there, and would be with her the whole time. No nobles were going to stop them, and no distracting thoughts were going to mess this up. They moved through the crowd with ease, and within a minute they were on the dance floor. Once they were near the center, he turned to look at his date. It looked like she was about to have a panic attack any moment.
Twilight,
he said, causing her eyes to shoot to his. Don't look at, or even think about, any pony else. Just focus on me, on us, and we'll be fine. Okay? Twilight took a ragged breath but nodded, just in time for the next song to begin. It had a moderate tempo and a light bouncing melody that made Flash think of wind. Twilight closed her eyes and popped her head to the music, learning the rhythm. A suffering shake of the head that Flash knew she did whenever she saw Rainbow Dash showing off. Perhaps the breezy music reminded her of her friend. Regardless of what it was, it seemed like it was calming her down a bit. Good. Flash gently took the lead for the dance, and they moved to stand on their hind hooves. He began slow, helping Twilight establish her balance before starting with simple steps, swaying and stepping in time. All the while, he never let his eyes leave Twilight's, especially because they still looked so beautiful. Slowly but surely, they improved and began to speed up to match the melody of the music. Flash could feel Twilight's vice-like grip relax, and with it, her breathing and posture followed suit.
Feeling braver, Flash sent Twilight out for a small twirl, bringing her back to his chest. He could see her dress spin and sparkle in a vibrant display as it swished around her legs, but his focus was still mainly on her eyes. The deep purple orbs stared back into his blue ones. There was still fear and anxiety in them, but it was being drowned out by a sense of excitement and some other emotions. Flash couldn't tell the specifics, but he did know that she was starting to have fun. Suddenly, Twilight slipped and began to fall backwards. Flash reacted without thinking as he spread his wings, using one to catch her and the other to stabilize them. Twilight blushed but smiled, which Flash returned as he pulled her back up. To his surprise, her own wings spread out, and the message was clear. It was time to mix it up. Increasing their tempo, Flash and Twilight began to use their wings as a part of their dance, moving them in time to the rhythm. Sometimes they would brush against their partners, as if they were another set of hooves. Other times they would move independently of their partners. Flash even once used his once or twice to send Twilight out for longer spins. The fear was gone now. The only thing he could see in her eyes was joy and warmth. And boy did it make his own heart flutter far more than it had all night. Flash had no idea how long the song was. To him, it felt like hours. But eventually it came to an end as Flash pulled Twilight in from the final spin, prompting both of them to drop back to four hooves and bow to each other in a finishing display. When Flash looked up, he was met with the smiling face of his date. But it wasn't a normal smile. It was the smile of some pony who, even for the briefest of moments, had absolutely no troubles in the world. She looked even more beautiful this way. Both of them were startled out of their gazing, however, when cheers erupted around them. Finally breaking eye contact and looking around, Flash realized that the nearby dancers had broken off to give them some room, and they had acquired a rather large audience. They had been so busy dancing he hadn't even noticed, and it looked like Twilight was in the same boat. Thankfully, almost every pony who had watched them was clapping, and Celestia and Luna were giving them approving smiles. And all of her friends, save Pinkie Pie, guess the plot hadn't demoted her yet, whatever that meant, were just outside their dance circle, leading the cheer. There may have been some other nobles on the outer edges that looked grumpy, but Flash didn't let that bother him. They always looked like that, Plus, they were probably just jealous. Alas, poor Twilight was now very nervous again, blushing and staring at the floor as the crowd cheered. Flash closed the distance once again and nudged her gently with his body. Twilight looked up, smiled weakly, and took his outstretched hoof. With their little performance over, they made room for the other dancers returning to the floor as they moved towards the punch bowl.
And here I thought you couldn't dance,
Flash said, smiling. Romance over, back to playful teasing. I usually don't have such a good partner, Twilight said, returning the grin. Where did you learn how to do that? I thought you said you couldn't dance.
Never tried it before, Flash admitted. I was just imitating other ponies. Well, except for the wing thing. But that was still relatively simple. Being a guard means you have to help guard a lot of events, just watching everything unfold. Some involve dancing, others don't.
So you're able to dance just by watching other ponies?
It's not like there's a lot of things to do when you're standing guard. I can probably tell you how many jewels there are in the throne room door, and how many panes there are in each window of the Hall of History, just because I've spent so much time there while being bored out of my mind.
I certainly hope guarding me isn't boring.
How could it be? You're far more interesting than an empty hallway. Especially considering how many fun adventures and interesting things happen on a weekly basis. Well, except for the monster attacks and disasters. Those were just annoying.
I would certainly hope so, she said, elbowing him lightly. Flash stuck his tongue out and was rewarded with a small laugh that made him smile. The two lapsed into a comfortable silence as they got their punch and sat down at another unoccupied table. As they listened to the next song the band played, Flash couldn't help but glance at Twilight. While she still looked as beautiful as she did when the night began, there was something else that was different about her now. It was as if a weight had been lifted off her mind, and she was letting more of herself shine through the mask she wore.
Okay, he was totally being biased.
But he didn't really care. He loved her. And seeing her like this just made him feel, well, he couldn't really put it into words. Turning back to the dance floor, Flash watched Twilight's friend to try and distract himself. Rarity had apparently decided to humour poor Spike and share a dance with him, though it was more like she was hugging him and moving in time to the music, given how much taller than him she was. But Spike looked utterly blissful all the same. Rainbow had actually been pulled into a dance with the Wonderbolt Sovereign and looked even more excited than Twilight did when new books came from the Royal Library. Though he had to admit, he never actually thought he'd see Rainbow blush. Well, first time for everything. Fluttershy was lingering at the edge of the crowd, looking too nervous to join in and dance. But as Flash watched, Applejack found her and pulled her out onto the floor. They stayed near the edge, where there weren't as many ponies, so Flash had a clear view of Fluttershy smiling and giggling as the orange mare led her in some simple, yet rather outrageous-looking steps. All in all, the girls looked like they were having just as much fun as he was. As the song ended, he turned to look at his date, who was watching her friends and grinning.
Hey, Twilight?
Yes, Flash? She said, looking him in the eye. Flash nearly lost his train of thought as those wondrous amethyst orbs met his own. The way they sparkled in the light, the way they no longer held any hesitation, made his stomach do flips that would impress Pinkie Pie.
But would you like to go for a walk in the garden?
He stuttered, trying not to blush himself. Sure, that sounds lovely, she said, a faint pink rising in her cheeks.
Why must she be so cute?
They made their way across the ballroom, doing their best to avoid the nobles before leaving through the side door that led to the gardens. Both ponies took a deep breath as the door closed behind them. The night was clear, the air was fresh, and the loud chatter and music of the ballroom was now just a dull murmur. Quite the shift, but still rather welcoming. The moon shone brightly on the garden, illuminating the path and the varieties of plants growing around them. There were far more than Flash remembered from his last visit, but that was probably because of Princess Luna. Rarity had said she had planted some new flowers. He didn't realise just how many there would be. He wondered if that glowing purple one would look nice in Twilight's hair, before realising he really needed to start focusing on things other than his stunning. And there went his mind again. Bad mind. Shaking his head to clear it, he began walking down the cobblestone path to catch up with Twilight. She was so mesmerised by the plants that she had taken off to investigate, not noticing that she was short one date. Not the first time she had left him behind since he had met her, but it was nice that it wasn't because she was reading and wandering this time. He caught up, but chose to stay quiet as she randomly spouted facts about the new plants around her, many of which she must have found in books because she was Twilight. Pinky was right. She was adorable, especially at times like this. As they reached the central clearing of the garden, about 10 minutes later, the noise of the ballroom had faded entirely, leaving them to enjoy the soft sounds of the crickets and other nocturnal creatures that called the garden home. Twilight had stopped talking along the way to listen to some of the songs the garden creatures produced, including that of a cricket that had decided to jump on Flash's nose. After a couple of minutes, her head had settled on Flash as she continued to listen to the garden's music. Not that he minded. Her mane was really soft. Focus? Oh, forget it. However, as the two neared the gazebo in the very centre of the garden, Flash heard something, a sound that most definitely did not blend into the rest of the garden's noises. It was a high-pitched sound, almost like "Yip!" Twilight squealed. Flash's instincts from Guard Academy kicked into high gear as he grabbed Twilight and forced her onto the ground. Less than 3 seconds before a hoof-sized rock flew over them at a ferocious speed. It crunched into a nearby tree with a sickening crunching of bark that made Flash wince. He turned his head enough to take a look and saw that the rock hadn't broken through the tree trunk completely, but it was embedded in the wood deep enough that he could just see the edge. Well, Buck, that was close, he thought as he scrambled to his hooves, hiding Twilight behind him. At that speed, the rock wouldn't have killed Twilight, but it would have knocked her out, at best. The universe cackled evilly. Flash would have lamented the universe again, but he had bigger problems right now. First of which, just as he started scanning the plants near where the rock had come from, the enraged face of Duke Bullhorn entered the clearing. Boy, did Flash need to restrain himself so he wouldn't knock the unicorn out with his own hooves. Seriously, what was wrong with this family? You really are an idiot if you think attacking a princess is a good idea, Flash said, his face hard. Understatement of the century right there. This wouldn't even have been a problem if you had just stayed out of it, you feather-brained nincompoop. The Duke spat. Your job is to serve your betters, not go off rubbing noses with royalty for political gain. Seriously? How much more of this did he have to listen to tonight? Right, because my status is really at the top of my priorities, Flash said with an eye roll. Maybe he could convince Celestia to lock this guy in a mental facility. Some pony like him needed to be locked in a padded cell for a few years to calm down. He helped Twilight back to her hooves without taking his eyes off of the Duke. His horn wasn't glowing yet, but Flash wasn't going to take any chances. He had no idea what the Duke's skill level was, so it was better to be cautious. Status is all that matters. Not that a moronic commoner could possibly understand that. Oh, dear Luna. But then Twilight spoke up. You leave him alone, she snapped, moving next to Flash, despite his attempts to keep her behind him. He's far smarter and nobler than any of the real nobles I've had to deal with, especially the ones like you. You be quiet, you spoiled brat, Bullhorn yelled, causing Twilight to flinch and for Flash to growl. If he wasn't so focused on trying to keep Twilight safe, he would have decked this jackass 3 times already. Not only are you unqualified to make even the simplest of decisions, but because of your stubbornness, my son has been permanently barred from the gala. As he should be, Flash said, lowering himself into a combat stance, ushering Twilight behind him again with his wing. You and him give the word noble a bad taste in ponies' mouths. I am the blood of royalty, the Duke roared. My blood and the blood of all nobles gives us a standing you can't possibly understand. We are the backbone of Equestria, far more than you or that commoner standing with you. He thrust a hoof at Twilight, his face getting more and more twisted by the second. Dang it, weren't there supposed to be guards in the garden after the time Fluttershy drove the animals into the ballroom? Where the heck were they? Flash made himself take a deep breath. Not the time to freak out. Old Bull's doing that enough for both of us. Looking at the Duke more closely, Flash saw that his eyes were shrunken and bloodshot. His mane was a mess, and he was actually foaming ever so slightly at the mouth. Clearly he was more deranged than normal, possibly in the middle of having a mental breakdown. He had only been joking about the mental asylum. Was that actually necessary? What's worse, it meant he really needed to stay between the Duke and Twilight. If he was unstable, there's no telling how his magic might reach should Flash try and fight him. Maybe if he mentioned Celestia, he could get through to him. After all, she did have power to revoke his status, so maybe the threat of losing his noble status would shock him out of whatever the heck this was. It was worth a shot, hopefully. Regardless of what you think, Flash began, trying to keep his voice level. How do you think Princess Celestia will act if she finds out you attacked a fellow princess? Flash would have continued, but apparently he chose the wrong thing to say, as Bullhorn literally caught a blaze in his rage. His fur became white, his mane became literal red fire as his magic ran amok. It was so powerful, Flash could practically feel the crazy flying off of the Duke's horn. She shouldn't even be a princess! The rage-shifted unicorn roared. My family should hold the title of royalty, not hers! Flash immediately backed off, pushing Twilight back from the raging maelstrom of magic in front of him. Not that she protested. What the heck are you talking about? Flash asked, now greatly worried for Twilight and himself. Trying to run or fly away might make the Duke attack, and he wasn't sure they could get out of danger radius quickly enough. Maybe if he kept the Duke ranting, the guards would show up already. You really think we didn't know there was going to be new royalty? Bullhorn bellowed. We knew 6 months before Hoof that Celestia was going to be adding a new addition to the royal family. We saw the signs, the preparations. And when us nobles confronted her, she admitted that she was looking for someone to promote to the status of prince or princess. That should have been me! Okay, one, you're nuts, Flash thought, shaking his head in disbelief. But keep talking. The Duke kept his eyes fixed on Flash, but the more he talked, the more he started to pace. If he would just turn away. I did everything right! I utilised all my resources, called in years of political and non-political favours. I demonstrated that I was unwavering, powerful, connected, and capable of ruling alongside her and her sister. I was the only one that made sense, the only one that could be fit to rule. What does she do? She chooses some common unicorn from some backwater town in the middle of nowhere and gives her bucking wings. All that time and effort, and she just glances over me, as if I don't exist, as if I'm not important. She shouldn't have been royalty. It should have been me. Now, the moment Bullhorn turned away, Flash closed the distance and sucker-punched the raving lunatic across the face. The rage shift ended, and now the much less on-fire Duke tumbled to the ground like a rag doll. Who knew I'd actually have to use the rage shift training I learned in Guard Academy? He thought as he shook out his foreleg, trying not to grin at Bullhorn's eyes rolled in different directions. Now that he had knocked the Duke out of it, the unicorn's magic would be so scattered for a while he wouldn't be able to levitate a fly. Perfect. You're delusional, Flash growled. Celestia was never looking among the nobles for a candidate. It was only ever going to be Twilight. She just told you that she was looking for a candidate, so you wouldn't bug her about it. And because she knew that your obsession with it would lead you to keeping it a secret. That way the news would never leave Canterlot, and Twilight would never find out. Okay, most of that was just guesswork, but he had more important things to say anyway. And if Celestia was looking for a noble to ascend,
She would never have picked some pony like you. Twilight deserves her wings more than any pony I've ever met, especially the nobles. You think you deserve wings over her? You don't even deserve your title! Bullhorn recoiled as if he was slapped, stumbling away from the Pegasus as he tried to get to his hooves. But Flash didn't stop. You're just a bully who throws a tantrum whenever he doesn't get what he wants. You attack and yell because you know deep down you're nothing. Twilight. He felt her move to his side again, so he draped his wing over her, trying not to grin as she leaned into his touch. Forget not telling her how he felt. This idiot needed to know how amazing she was, and he wasn't going to hold back. Twilight is everything that you wish you could be. That's why you hate her. She's smart, talented, funny, kind, and most of all, loved. Loved by her friends, loved by her family, and loved by almost every pony in Equestria. That's why she was chosen. Not power, not ego, but because she knows what it's like to love others and be loved. You wish you had the talents and gifts she did, but you never will. Because she's spectacular, and you're just a nobody with an old family name. The Duke looked so mad as he stumbled back to his hooves that Flash wasn't sure he could even move his face anymore. Though that might just be because he was slowly getting a big ugly bruise from where he was punched. Good. And Twilight. Twilight was looking at him in a mix of shock, admiration, bashfulness, and joy. Also good. Growling, the Duke's horn sputtered as he tried to overcome the feedback from his rage shift. Flash ducked in front of Twilight, ready to put the Duke in his place again. No matter how good the Duke was at magic, he was practically helpless after such a big rage shift. Something Flash was all too happy to capitalize on. But before Duke Bullhorn could speak, the plot demanded Pinky. The plot demands me! The pink mare yelled, jumping off a nearby gazebo and throwing a pie, which hit the Duke directly in the face. As he stumbled back in shock, Pinky pulled out her party cannon from her mane and slammed it down on Bullhorn, shoving him so deep into the barrel that only his rear and back hooves were sticking out. As he flailed about, Pinky turned to the still shocked Twilight and Flash, gave a sailor salute, and fired! But Bullhorn flew backwards halfway across the garden, screaming like a little filly, before hitting a floating backboard, falling through a basketball hoop, and landing in a large glowing trash can face first. A lid then slammed down on it and spun like a top until a satisfied click sounded throughout the garden. It's good for the win! Discord announced in a sportscaster voice as a small set of bleachers filled with Discords appeared. All of them cheered excitedly. A couple even held up cards with the number 10 on them, flashing neon colours. Now, completely flabbergasted, neither Twilight or Flash could respond as Discord floated over and hoof-bumped Pinky while Bullhorn raged in his metal prison. Don't you worry about old Bullhair, Discord said with a smirk, patting the trash can affectionately. I'll let Celestia know what he said, and maybe the media. So go and enjoy your night, maybe fall in love. Everyone knows there's nothing quite as chaotic as love. He winked before he, Pinky, and the trash can all disappeared in a bright flash of light. Flash was pretty sure he heard his brain breaking in the silence that followed. I literally have no idea how to respond to that, he said, with Bullhorn and the fact that Discord just saved our night. Seriously, how do I react? Okay, he was officially over his limit for all kind of nonsense tonight. So much so that he was half tempted to just bang his head into the nearest hard object to try and forget it all. I'll get back to you on that, Twilight said, shaking her head. I think we should just pretend that never happened. Agreed. So, that walk? I'd love to.
And with that, the couple set off again, with the gazebo now tainted by the interruption of the Duke. The two ponies moved further into the garden until they came to another clearing. There was a small hill, which served as the perfect spot for them to sit down and enjoy the night air. They sat in silence, and while he wanted very much to forget about Bullhorn, the unicorn remained stubbornly at the forefront of Flash's thoughts. He knew the Duke wasn't exactly smart, but seriously? He truly thought that some high and mighty jackass like himself would actually gain the title of Prince? He wasn't even fit to run a donut shop, let alone try and rule a bucking country. But what pissed him off the most was how he viewed Twilight. She was so much more than just some common unicorn before she ascended. She was Celestia's personal student, a talented mage in her own right, and, oh yeah, she helped save Equestria a good 3 times, maybe more. She was the obvious pick for a new princess, and if not her, then one of her friends would have certainly fit the bill better than Bullhorn. Especially Pinkie. She might bury everyone in a non-stop supply of cake, but she would still make sure every pony had a good time. And she would definitely be better than that Duke. What was he saying? Any pony would be better than the Duke. Flash took a deep breath and let it out as a sigh, trying to let go of the rage that filled him. He had been so mad before, sure, but his anger had never felt quite so intense. It was like a raging fire, and not even seeing the Duke humiliated in front of him could quench that blaze. However, feeling Twilight lean up against him worked about as well as a pouring rainstorm on the heat. The only thing that mattered was that she was okay, and that the raving lunatic was going to get what was coming to him. He hoped Twilight wouldn't let Bullhorn's words get to her. But if they did, he would make sure to comfort her as best as she could. Flash? Twilight asked. What you said to the Duke? About me? Did you mean it? Speak of the devil. Flash smiled softly and wrapped her in his wing. Every word. But what about all my mistakes? All my mishaps? I wouldn't even be a princess if it weren't for my friends. And I wouldn't be a guard. And almost no pony would be where they are now, Flash said, squeezing her reassuringly. Every pony gets help from others. It just so happens that yours helps you further than you could have ever dreamed. But that doesn't mean your accomplishments are any less important. But no buts, Flash said, spinning himself and his date so that they were facing each other. Wow. She looked even more beautiful in the moonlight. Focus, Flash. Comfort now, admire later. Every pony is always their own worst critic. Mistakes and mishaps are how we learn. And they don't make you any less special than you already are. Says you, Twilight said, looking down. But that wasn't all Flash had to convince her. And your friends. And your parents. And most of Equestria. And Celestia and Luna. You're not saying the 2,000-year-old sun goddess of wisdom is wrong, are you? You mean the same sun goddess of wisdom that got food poisoning because of her sweet tooth? Twilight asked slyly, prompting both of them to burst out into laughter. She had him there, but the fact that he got to her to laugh was a major victory in itself after what had just happened. Dear Celestia, did he love Twilight's laugh. As they calmed down, Twilight looked up at Flash again. Thank you, Flash. That means a lot to me. Also, I think we can add at least one more test to the schedule. I mean, if that's okay with you. She ducked her head again and blushed. How could he say no to that face? He couldn't. Simple as that. Flash smiled. How about that pizza place near the Ponyville Town Hall this Friday? It's a date, Twilight said, beaming. Before Flash could say anything else, a new noise reached their ear. Though a bit distant, they could clearly hear the sound of a song from the ballroom. Looking over, Flash realised that somehow one of the windows next to the stage had been opened, letting the music flow smoothly out into the garden. He also swore he saw Pinky for a second, but he blinked and she was gone. Was she? It doesn't matter. Shaking his head, Flash stood up and offered his hoof to the lovely princess before him. Another dance? She asked playfully, raising an eyebrow as she accepted his hoof.
What can I say? I love getting lost in your eyes,
Flash said. Twilight giggled, but didn't look away. In fact, her smile seemed to grow. Another success. The two stood on their forehooves as the song began in earnest. It was far slower than the song of their first dance, but Twilight didn't seem to mind. Slowly swaying and twirling under the stars, the guard and the princess danced. The world just seemed to melt away for Flash. The only thing he could see were the eyes of his partner, in the sparkle of the moonlight on her clothing. She truly was perfect. They danced even as the song ended and another began, shifting perfectly to match the faster tempo, then again as a slow song played. But this last song was special. This song, sung of stress, of struggle, of triumph, and of love. Flash didn't even realize how close Twilight was until she closed her eyes and planted her lips on his. Both of their wings shot out, Flash's in surprise, Twilight's in joy. But Flash got over his surprise and returned the kiss, savouring the taste and feel of her lips. As they broke away, both of them whispered what had been on their minds all night. I love you. In the end, it would be the second best kiss she had ever given him.